All right, so again, welcome to Chapter and Verse. Happy to have you all here. We do our readings on Zoom in February and January for weather, and also just so that we have the opportunity to have some readers from other places, such as Portland, Maine. The sponsor, JPP, is the sponsor of Chapter and Verse, which is in its 28th year, I think. And we include poetry and prose. We normally meet in person in the historic Loring Greenough House in Jamaica Plain. I've got my Loring Greenough virtual background here. And Jamaica Plain Poets also buy books from each of the readers and donates them to the Jamaica Plain branch of the Boston Public Library. So we're going to start this evening with Rebecca Turkewitz. Rebecca Turkewitz is a writer and high school teacher living in Portland, Maine. She's the author of the story collection Here in the Night, Black Lawrence Press. Her fiction and humor writing have appeared in the Normal School, the Master's Review, Electric Literature's Recommended Reading, the New Yorker's Daily Shouts, and elsewhere. Please welcome Rebecca Turkewitz.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so glad to be included. I'm excited for this. I should have asked before. Is it okay? There's some swears in the story I'm going to read. Is that all right? Some strong language. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm reading from the title story in the book, and this is actually the first time I've ever read it in front of people. So we'll see how it goes. Okay. So this story is called Here in the Night. Ellie and Jess are driving down Highway 17, away from South Carolina's Winyah Bay. They're coming from a visit with Ellie's parents, headed to the airport and then back to Maine, where they've lived together for 5 years. The first several miles were lit with motel signs and seafood shacks and passing cars, but now it's so dark. The only thing visible outside the cone of the rental car's headlights are a thumbnail moon and a spray of stars. They've driven past the cafe where Ellie used to sling fried clams to sunburned tourists, the field in which Hurricane Hugo had stranded 2 shrimp boats, and Ellie's grandmother's little yellow cottage with its gingerbread trim. Ellie has pointed out these landmarks to Jess on previous drives, but tonight the car is quiet. It's June 12th, 2016. Some of you already know what this means. It means that in the early hours of the morning, a man walked into a gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida, and opened fire, killing 49 people in a place that was supposed to be their haven. It means 53 wounded. It means Ellie crying in bed that morning as she scrolled through Twitter. It means Jess wondering why she hasn't cried yet. It means Ellie's mother trying to console them, even though she still stage whispers the word lesbian every time she says it. It means Jess telling Ellie to stop checking her phone if it only makes her sadder. It means Ellie accusing Jess of being strangely unmoved by the tragedy. It means guilt at being safe and alive and able to bicker, able to make up. It means that by the time they're on their way to the airport, exhaustion has settled thickly around them. Static cuts into the song on the radio, and Ellie changes the station a few times before she finds what she's looking for: the updated death toll, and then a summary of a survivor's account. Can we turn this off? Jess asks. I don't want to think about it right now. How can you think about anything else? Jess fiddles with the air conditioner and then turns her attention to the tiny slice of scenery that falls within the headlight's reach. Baby, that wasn't an accusation, Ellie says. I know, I just want to be home. Ellie switches the radio off. Me too, but it's always hard for me to leave my folks. Jess knows she should let things be, but she can't resist saying, even today, your dad was driving me crazy. He's so obsessed with the idea that the shooter must have been secretly gay. He was trying. He's been trying for a long time. Jess always feels prickly and out of place on these annual visits. She looks out of place too, with her half-shaved head and lopsided tumble of messy curls, the spindly pine trees tattooed down her arm, her knee-length boys' shorts and thick thighs. She grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, with progressive parents, and she hates that Ellie's family still refers to her as Ellie's friend. She hates how the couch is always made up for her, so she has to sleep without the comfort of Ellie's long limbs. She hates that they can't hold hands or kiss in front of Ellie's dad. When Jess looks back over, Ellie's crying. I'm sorry, Jess says, putting her hand on the back of Ellie's neck under the soft swoosh of Ellie's ponytail. What's wrong, baby? I'm sad, Ellie says. Why are you acting like this doesn't have anything to do with us? Like it's just something that happened to other people. I can be sad and not cry. Jess usually loves driving with Ellie. She likes how the car creates a little pocket world just for them. But now, Ellie has let the horror of the day in. What Jess wants, all Jess wants, is for her and Ellie to be alone in the car without the crushing weight of other people's tragedy. She wants to free them from the tangle of other people's sorrow and other people's hate. They hit a pothole. Not even a very big one, Jess will think later. And the car begins to make a clunking sound. Ellie maneuvers it to the side of the road, and the headlights catch a cloud of insects so dense it looks like a snow squall. Shit, Ellie says. Shit, shit, shit. What was that? A car whizzes past them and their seats shake. A flat tire, I think, Ellie says. When Jess opens her door, the air is so humid it feels thick. The chorus of insect noise sounds like millions of teeth chattering. Ellie comes around to Jess's side of the car and the bushes erupt into movement as something darts off into the high grass. Ellie kneels by the traitorous tire and thumps the wheel well. When she gets up, pebbles cling to her bare knees. A mosquito lands in the crook of her elbow. She slaps it. We'll miss our flight, Jess says. She's embarrassed that neither of them knows how to change a tire. But if she were to attempt any heroics, it wouldn't be on this dark road with this unfamiliar car. What happens if we miss our flight? There are other flights, Ellie says. She's already dialing AAA, putting the phone to her ear. Ellie's always the emotional one until there's a task to complete. Then she's all business. If we need to stay another day, we'll stay another day. No big deal. Now Jess does feel like crying, which she would never admit. She goes to the trunk to search for a long-sleeve shirt. Even in the heat, it'll be better than letting the gnats bump against her bare skin. She sits on the edge of the open trunk to wait. A little ways down the road, there's a water tower perched on bowed legs. Against the velvet sky, it looks like a hovering UFO. They'll be here in 40 minutes, Ellie says. Maybe less. Think so. We probably will have to reschedule our flight, Ellie concedes. So we might be stuck here another day. Your worst nightmare. She perches next to Jess, leaving a thin gap between their bodies that Jess longs to close. I am sad about what happened, Jess says. But I also feel, I don't know, I can't explain it. Can you at least try? Ellie can never abide a mystery. And now that Jess has had some time to think, she does want to explain. I don't know if you remember this, Jess says, but last year there was a story in the Times about a funeral home in Mississippi that wouldn't pick up the body of an 80-year-old man after they found out he was gay. I remember, Ellie says. I read the article while I was eating breakfast. It upset me so much that I had to throw away the rest of my toast. But I didn't cry then either. I felt angry, or like I should be angry. Mostly, I wished I hadn't read it. It felt so awful to be reminded before I'd finished my coffee that there are people in this country who wouldn't even lay my body to rest. I don't need a newspaper to remind me of that, Ellie says. She takes Jess's hand. It's the first time she's held it since they got off the plane a week ago. But that's not our lives, Jess says. At least not in Portland. Enough of that, Ellie says, swatting the air. Maine is not better than here. But isn't it? Jess says, laughing. Then she adds, I'm sorry I make these trips difficult. I'm a true New Englander. We're wary of everything. Especially outsiders, Ellie says, like me. Not to be trusted, Jess agrees. She leans in and kisses Ellie. The kiss is slow and deep and reminds Jess of kisses from early in their relationship, before things between them became so steady and certain. They're still kissing when a green pickup truck rumbles into view. The sound of the horn makes them jump apart. There are two men in the cab. The driver is leaning over the passenger to shout at them through the open window. They don't understand the first part of what he yells, but the sentence ends with dikes and then an ugly bark of laughter. As the truck passes, they take in the Confederate flag decal covering the whole back window and the man in the passenger seat craning his neck to watch their reaction. They're too surprised to show any emotion, which they're grateful for. They both know that in situations like this, it's best not to react. When the truck disappears around a bend, Jess rolls her eyes. Assholes. Do you think we should get in the car and lock the doors? Ellie asks. Oh, sweetie, we're okay. Jess puts her arm around Ellie and kisses her temple. Ellie stands up and steps back. They're gone, Jess says. Ellie nods, but stays where she is. Jess furrows her brow, but doesn't reach for Ellie again. I love you, Jess says. I love you too, Ellie says softly, pulling at the frayed bottom of her shorts. Jess swivels so she can search through the outer pocket of her suitcase, finally pulling out a deck of cards. She's about to ask Ellie to come play rummy, but Ellie is staring at the road behind Jess. When Jess turns, she sees a pickup drawing nearer. Against the glare of headlights, she can't tell if it's the same truck circling back. She watches the orange glow of the blinker as the truck eases to the side of the road. She listens to the pop of gravel under the tire treads. When the truck comes to a full stop, there's no doubt that it's the same one. Jess stands and joins Ellie. They link arms. The driver looks middle-aged. One side of his jaw droops slightly. It seems like you ladies are stranded, he calls across the empty road. There's something in his voice, a forced and teasing lightness that would set off Jess's alarm bells even if she weren't already on edge. Jess tries to think of the magic words that will keep the men inside their truck, away from her and Ellie. Nothing comes. She can only shake her head. I'm happy to help, the driver says. Thank you, but we've got it under control, Jess says. Sure doesn't seem like it. The man laughs. Ellie is scanning the brush behind them, perhaps considering escape routes. Jess wonders if their fear is an overreaction, fueled by the stress of the day and the night's inky blackness and the isolation of the rural road. She wonders what they'll do if the worst happens. She wonders if next week someone will read an article about this and be unable to finish her toast. The driver opens his door and steps out onto the road. And I'll tell you, they survive this. They survive, shaken but unharmed. They survive, and they get back to their small third-floor apartment that catches the sunlight and glows like amber for half an hour every day. They get back to their six-toed orange tabby, to the waft of hot, ginger-scented air that escapes the bathroom when Ellie gets out of the shower, to Jess rubbing her feet together like a praying mantis to get off any dirt before she climbs into their shared bed, to their bed, to books with cracked spines, to grumbles about alarms going off too early, to an extra 10 minutes of stolen sleep, to their heavy door that keeps the noise out, to their quiet, complex lives that are, on the whole, happier and calmer than either of them expected. You can know this, but they cannot. And so, in this long and jagged moment, the sound of the truck door opening is like a gunshot. Even the bugs seem to quiet. Even the wind seems to stop. And their hearts are rioting in the cages of their chests, and their limbs are pulsing, and their bodies are electric, and they are ready to flee together into the hot and waiting night. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. That was great.
Show us your book again. Show us your book again.
Yes.
Thank you.
And actually, Rebecca, if you have the information about where people can get your book and you want to put that into the chat for everyone, feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So next we're going to have both Margot and Vivian read. So I'm going to read both of their bios and then a little blurb about their their reading project. So Margot Wizansky's manuscript, The Yellow Sweater, was published by Kelsey Press in 2023. Lily Poetry Review published Wild for Life, chapbook memoir of her near-death experience in 2021. Her poems are in many journals: New Ohio Review, Spillway, Cimarron, Missouri Review, Bellevue Literary Review. She edited Mercy of Tides, Rough Places, Plain, What Poems Know, tribute to Barbara Helfgott Hyatt. Carlow University awarded her a residency, Isle of Innisfree, Ireland Writers at Work. Those are two separate things, but Isles of Innisfree, Ireland, that sounds amazing. Writers at Work, a fellowship in Salt Lake City. She transcribed the oral history of her friend Emerson Stamps, his grandparents enslaved, his parents sharecroppers. Missouri Review featured her poems about him. Vivian Eyre's new collection, Ishmael's Violets, launched in 2024. Her poems have appeared in the Massachusetts Review, Bellingham Review, One Art, Pangyris, Quiddity, Spire, the Asheville Poetry Review, The Fourth River, and more. The Brunch Poems series, founded by Vivian in 2013, continues its monthly poetry discussions at Floyd Memorial Library in Greenport, New York. She has served as guest curator for the Whale House at the Southold Historical Society Museum in Southold, New York, and as a cold-stunned sea turtle rescue volunteer for New York Marine Rescue. Vivian lives in Warren, Rhode Island. In their reading collaboration, Fragile Families, Land and Sea, Margot and Vivian exchange sets of poems from their recent collections that explore surprising connections and resonances that speak to the shared themes of love, mystery, and loss across human families and among the vanishing creatures of the marine world. Vivian's and Margot's collections are both published by Kelsey Books. To bring up their video for everybody so we can see them side by side, and they can go ahead.
First to say, Rebecca, thank you for that lovely reading. And Susanna, thank you for getting this to work side by side, and to thank everyone for coming and for their patience. As Susanna said, we're doing a duet series here to show the connection between and the resonances between the fragile families of the land and the sea. So I'm going to begin. what the sea told me. Lately, I've been practicing to stay. I stand here like a seawall. It's too cold to sit down. At the water's edge, scored by rollers, there's a glacial moraine, flat-topped like a seat. Maybe it's a chair rock, where the ancients once sat with their guides at sunrise, asking for the sea's blessing. In this kingdom of slate, gray waves, I've slipped far down into myself. On cobbles and feldspar and quartz, my fears rise. If only I had paws or a leaning staff to walk across what doesn't give. A rush of wind through my coat, that old urge to turn away, that old way to flee. It came to me like a person. What changes me is outside of me. The rip-rap loosens. A kind of grace how I found this cove, without the asphalt road cutting through the corridor of pines, lofty shadows, juncos and sparrows, without the villager's hand-sketched map. I never would have heard the sea's words. Come closer.
Thank you all at Chapter and Verse for this opportunity. My father never told me. The year of his bar mitzvah, his father died suddenly. Things he didn't talk about. He never sang again, only whistled sometimes. His mother remarried the plumbing supply king, who refused to have teenagers in his house. So she left my father and his sister alone in the apartment. Did his mother come back to wash his clothes, put up dinners, while her new husband sold clean-out plugs? Her death certificate says divorced, but when? What grounds? He must have gnawed on her absence in that cramped apartment, must have taken it to school, let it lunge after him on the playground. His 15-year-old face already shattered with new beard, his shirts unironed. No forgiveness, holding on to the hurt that grew while he sat bitter on his brown tweed chair for the rest of his years, listened to the days dwindle down to a precious few, dead at 54, just like his father. Oh, his stuttering heart. He never told me how bad it was.
The circle of several centers. It was all visible at the water's surface. How the mother orca swam, pushing her calf in front, or carried its body on her forehead swelling, or in her mouth, which meant she couldn't eat. Was she trying to rouse, spark, kickstart the lungs, the way hope can be part reflex? The mist of 30 blowholes behind the mother wake, each whale taking a turn to push. How wide is the circumference of loss? Whether the sky was moonlit or moonless, and by the sun's travel lamp she swam, pushing, carrying her calf 100 miles in a circle, twice. It takes time to loosen the twists in a figure-8 knot, but how to square the heartbeats briefly there, like tiny kicks inside a mother's belly, as that mother folds the never-used onesie into a plastic bag. How big must a brain be to feel sadness? mouthfeel of salt, swimming so close to loss, the closeness so visible above the water's surface.
My first time. The memory buzzes under my skin like neon. In my early 20s, before I understood my daily risk of harassment and humiliation, before I had grievances, before I knew I was entitled to grievances, I was at the gynecologist, wrapped in a Johnny, lying down on the examining table, knowing in the observing part of my brain that a nurse was supposed to be with me, afraid of what the doctor might find. And he entered the room friendly, an older man, asked me a few questions, and then commanded, "Slide on down here, Margot. I'm going to fill you full of cold steel."
Whale shot, live stream on Instagram. Seated in a shallow craft, the red bikini girl. Expanse of ocean, a blue-gray backdrop. With eyes flashing light, her lithe body swivels to smile at the camera lens. A long, thick shadow sidles up, and the voice behind the lens says, "Oh my God, turn around, look." I see it. The orca's head rising slick from the seamouth. Over Mystery's rim, sheening with suntan oil. Her fingers skim the whale's thin, translucent skin, know nothing of how the oxides soak through. This one touch lifts this girl weightless from the gravity of her land body. Yes, I too have touched wonder, washed my hands without washing the one I touched.
An early case, 1961. Mother's elegance, her fashion sense, Christian Dior suit and pillbox hat, her buying trips to Paris, her talent for selling cocktail dresses to the rich, amounted to nothing the night her boss, widower and sole owner of that flagship department store, a palace, antiques everywhere, crystal chandeliers, white-gloved atomizer women spraying French perfume. And in the cafe, drinks, 2 jiggers strong, whipped cream 5 inches high, invited her to dinner. And she, expecting the other buyers for drinks in his suite at the Waldorf Astoria, knocked on his door. He was alone, wearing a bathrobe, nothing else. She thought she'd interrupted his shower until he untied the bathrobe, let it hang open, and made her a proposition. "Divorce your husband, marry me, and your children will want for nothing." Her broad smile dimmed, and she composed herself, took her leave, trying not to register shock or offend him. Still, the next day, he fired her. "Your performance," he said. And for 50 years, she never told anyone, even after she was scooped up to run another fancy dress shop, even after my father died, without kicking that man's sorry ass, even after Anita Hill testified. Well turned out at 90, wearing a silk scarf and 3 necklaces, still believing she'd asked for it somehow. Mother told me for the first time about the miserable sandwiches her boss had ordered in that night for dinner. White bread, buttered, with a little slice of ham.
Ode to the cold stunned sea turtle. Where in these nets of light, in this tide, can I find you? Once you knew how to nose out of the birth egg's shell, with moonlight and stars, your signs, to shimmy the downslope into the open blue. Your flipper's quick slap to the undersea, a frantic rush to cross the salty vastness. All your senses trusting the way it's always been. How soundly you slept, blind stitched into a sea pocket, missing the cue of the water's slow cooling. Yes, the sea changes around us, changes us in ways we barely detect. I hope it isn't true. The only way I see how much the sea has changed is by losing you.
If the goddamn war hadn't happened, goddamn war. If my father hadn't worked nights at the shipyard, if he could have used his education in the law, if he hadn't had to help in the family business, medicine cabinets, if that family business hadn't gone under, if his father hadn't died so young, if my grandmother hadn't married again, left him alone to fend for himself, if he hadn't traded Xerox too soon, if he'd forgiven himself, if he'd moved us to a big house on Lehigh Parkway, if my mother hadn't clicked down the stairs in high heels, Chanel No. 5, a backless dress for the cocktail party, if not for my father's leaky heart, if he could have spent his days trolling for tuna on the deep and warm and boundless, if the Phillies ever went all the way.
Letter to Sereno Edward Bishop, the 12-year-old cabin passenger on a whaling vessel. Were you a little night bird flying into the fire on the schooner's deck? Were you like moonlight that strobed the lonely faces of whalemen as you traveled alone to an unknown divinity school? You have to love a thing to study it. More closely than seabirds circling the deck, you studied the men who caught 3 albatrosses, although it was Sunday. The birds can't fly after they're on the deck or walk. It's ridiculous. The cruel mesh of the foot, the missing hind toe, the wobble to stand up, wings seesawing, the birds falling over. They killed and skinned them, you wrote, but you didn't say how or why. You must have stood on the deck, your souls bloodied from bird and whale. Did the frayed invisible light shield you from the I don't care ways, from the wheel of the day? You must have carried those shiny parables to divinity school inside your chest, a nest of ashes.
If time could flow backward, my father would still dance the two-step in new cowboy boots he bought at the shop in the square. Everyone would eat the picture-perfect turkey I'd roasted, and we'd listen to Frankie play cello in the living room. The 22-pound tuna, untaxidermied, unglued from the plaque commemorating the only prize my father ever won, would swim off Miami, the hook unhooked from its mouth. If time flowed back to our house on Ott Street, to the Chesterfield chair he collapsed in every night post-heart attack, the upholstery would be taut as the day it was new, and his fake gold watch for the 25 years he worked at Surefit slipcovers, tucked into its velvet-lined box, would go back to Gerard Perregaux, the time before his children disappointed him with our separate mistakes, our first disagreeable mates, our salvage operations. My father's ashes would gather themselves to fly out of the Caribbean where mother cast them off Grand Anse Beach, cruise back to New York aboard the Ocean Pearl in a cardboard box, his bones rattling all night.
Edit in gasps of wonder. Although the channel was off limits, he was steering there. For the tip jar to fill, they had to see whales. The baby whale backflipped away from its mother. From the sun deck, this was clear. That single breath geyser too close to the boat. Like this, he'd said, rocking his hands side to side, how the boat shook when the baby whale and its mother swam under the hull, like a minivan and a double-wide bus. It took time to cut the engines, he'd said. Sitting next to him at the dive bar, I could picture those white pleated torpedoes, that velvet rushing toward four-blade propellers. It was useless to ask if the whale's skin had been scraped or gashed. He was swallowed by the oh, oh, oh from a coterie of tank tops, buying rounds to salute that onboard day. But I did hear him say, "Who will cruise with me tomorrow?"
I didn't know the earth was dying. Nothing was perishable. Nothing was miraculous to me either, not even the sun. Its multiple orbs illuminating every living thing. Trees lifting their branches to meet it halfway, cabbages rolling their roundness toward it. The deep abiding sun I knew nothing about in my 20s, hardly looked at, shades drawn, could have been shining or not. And I miss the brush strokes of all the starry nights, focused on that great burning in my center, a mystery interesting only to me. I wasn't singing to an abundance of world, didn't detect any force or light. I wrote a little at the edge of things, couldn't move past the turmoil in my head. Is a poem a kind of litany? Was it only once when I was a girl that I skated to the outside of town on a frozen stream? Miraculous, ephemeral. I looked down at fish and leaves frozen together under clear blackness.
Speak memory. What do you think? My dad asks the shop boy in the marine supply store. They look great, the teen nods, looking toward my dad's boat feet. I guess they did, considering the cracks across his orthopedic sneakers he'd been wearing. Plimsolls, Dad announces, remarkably, since he often calls me by my sister's name. Later, he'll ask the name of those boat shoes. Sounds like a gin cocktail, umbrella, pimples, the pine-scented aerosol. Once I say plimsoll, he'll say load line on a hull, as if we were playing the game, what is it? It's the water line on the hull of a ship. If sea rises above the line, cargo drenches. Here in this shop, Dad stare, hypnotic, in the full-length mirror, staring at what? His tonsured head, the half-moon pouches under his eyes, the belly swell against the needles, just the belly swell against the buckle's despair, the patch where needles for dialysis bit. Okay, son, he says, not to the shop boy who's vanished, not to me. I want to believe that he's speaking to the part of himself before nautical twilight, the stars still bright enough to vessel out to sea.
The black slacks. At the boundary waters of her decline, little mother decides she needs new black slacks. So thin from salting her food, forgetting to eat, I'm trying to find her what fits. My little mother's decided she needs new black slacks. In the dressing room, she holds a pair in her hands. I'm trying to find her what fits. She can't remember if she's about to try them on or take them off, the pair she holds in her hands. She knew retail, high end. It was her life. She can't remember if she's about to try them on. Slacks on the floor, on the chair, lopsided on hangers. She knew retail, high end. It was her life. Soon we find a rhythm. I hand her a pair. Slacks on the chair, the floor, on lopsided hangers. She tries them, rejects them. I whisk them away. Soon we find a rhythm. I hand her a pair. After she tries them, I give her another. She tries them, rejects them. I whisk them away. These fit, she says, the very pair she wore this morning. I'm finished giving her another pair to try. So thin from salting her food, forgetting to eat. These fit, she says, the very pair she wore this morning at the boundary waters of her decline.
Provincetown lobster diver swallowed by a humpback whale on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Epigraph. I wasn't technically swallowed, the diver says. Jimmy says, I got a show to do. I'm going with swallowed. Inside the wide open mouth of a papier-mâché whale, that diver sits, knees bent, like a boy scrunched into a bumper car. Eyes shuddering, he recalls the sensation, as if inside a car hurtling headlong into a churn of sea, whip raising his neck hair. Under the stage lanterns, his face reddens, the blush of death flushed out in front of a live audience. They laugh, teeth showing, like the laughter of Romans when lions rushed into the Colosseum, the songs of our indifference. From the farthest distance, I can glide into that diver's fears. My first terror, the dive, gulped into the sea's pit, my arms feeling paper thin. And dear whale, what did you feel when that force crossed your home's threshold and entered you? I know it's not right to imagine you feel like me, but you do use language after all. Something was wounded when that diver kicked you until you spit him out. My tongue touches scar tissue, the knotted line inside my cheek. My body is an archive with spectacles, emptiness, resurrections, returning us to the abyss, to the gulf of communion, wider than a giant mouth agape.
Danger. After Tova Friedman. We stumbled into a dark, mud sliding our feet, thorny underbrush grabbing our ankles, boys, neighborhood boys in those innocent woods, sitting on wooden crates they hauled in, sitting beside oily black water, maybe a swamp or a pond. Could have been cottonmouth snakes, could have been swamp rats swimming, could have been raped, could have fallen and disappeared. No street lights, no buildings to get our bearings. Giddy from the secrecy, giggling, drinking near beer with the boys, showing off their private secret high. Not fallen boys, just boys showing off, not touching, not sex. It wasn't danger. I didn't know danger. The barracks, Nazis stomping big black boots, danger. Your mother made you hide under a woman just dead, warm at first. You, so small and still, so small.
Whale watch after Kara Hoblin's watercolor whale. Whale, the color of moonlight, so pale that I can see inside your body, the bones sketched in lamp-black ink, the enveloping seas like bruises, aubergine, pink, hospital green. I want my arms around this body, the long, streamlined, knobby spine I long to touch before she breaches out of the sea, twirls acrobatically mid-air, plunges with one brash slap to break open the sea door. I want to caress the flesh ripped at the flare of the fluke by iron barbs or blunt force blows. I want the flipper, the bony flanges, so like a human hand in my hands, as light as a scrim of mist.
Good sleep. My mother said she never slept. She always slept on the very edge of her bed, as far away as she could get from her second husband, in places intended for wakefulness, in the library on a bench, or in a chair where she could disguise her dozing. She gave herself to sleep. In the first row orchestra at Much Ado, in front of the giant TV in the lounge, the Phillies night game grinding down until the security guard woke her, walked her back to her apartment. A wakeful night after a day of many little sleeps. In the morning asleep, when her gentleman called to be sure she'd made it through. And when we drove her from Philly to Boston for the holidays, 6 hours in the back seat, asleep. Such a good sleeper, my mother.
Power naps. They're motionless, vertical. The mother sperm whale napping, with squid tentacles wilting from her mouth, like ribbons quivering in a current. Her calf sleeps, tail standing too. They seem like carved shamans between peace and precipice. How those muscled bodies make me shiver. The large blunt heads, almost comical. The calicites shaped like archipelagos. Are they dreaming? What is dream but clouds seeking abandoned shadows? I dream about glass-bottomed boats, constellations, failing Latin, falling, finding a secret room in my house. Their spiracles are quiet. Do they dim the lights in the brain room to stop breathing? How starstruck I am when a gold vein slips through the crack of my unknowing, the futility of a sure thing. When would the pencil drop from Einstein's hand to wake him from a nap? Might Melville have written about a pale squid if he had seen this suspended grace? I read his mother guarded her precious afternoon naps, the bliss of slumber after repast, never belonging to mothers alone.
Exaltation. Every day, the rapture of birds. Sunset approaching in red velvet shoes, leading Prince where the sky touches water, that radiance reflecting on the sea's flatness. Dark blue-violet streaks I want to plunge my face into. Improbable red blazes on the west side of every tree. Fades to dusk, the ordinary story of night beginning. And soon the moon, the shiver of stars. Once in Oxford, I heard the Magdalen College boy choir, the only time I felt exaltation in a chapel, those ruby bright, unbroken voices praising, no matter who they praised, their clear madrigals soaring past a multitude of polychrome saints, scaling the Gothic arches to a place I'd never been, a place where I might fly.
Thank you, Margot, and thank you all for your attention.
Thanks so much, both of you. It was really wonderful how your poems did really speak to each other back and forth. You've clearly got that to an art. I do want to make a couple of announcements. The next chapter and verse reading is going to be at Loring Greeno House, which is at 12 South Street in Jamaica Plain on March 8th at 7:30. The readers will be Holly Gurin, David Surrett, and Gary Whited. Holly, do you want to make an announcement about the next Razi Reads? I think it's this
Yes, it's next week on Thursday on Zoom at 7 p.m. The readers are I'm not sure I pronounce it correctly, but Jali Lee and Anastasia Vasos. Wonderful writer, Anastasia. I haven't heard Jali before. So that'll be 7. If you would like a link just send an email to me, HGURAN@AOL.com. Thank you.
I can put that in the chat as well. And Margot and Vivian, please do put some. Oh, okay. Vivian, you just sent that message direct to me. If you should be able to select sending it to everyone, or I can just copy it. The message about, yeah, if you can put both of your books in the chat for everybody, so we know where to get them. Does anybody have any announcements of other readings that are coming up? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks also to Dorothy Deerfield and David Miller, who are the co-directors of this series, and the rest of the Jamaica Pond poets. We all help where we can. And now if anyone has questions for the readers or comments, please feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat.